Welcome back, Camden Catholic and Honors. That's right, dual flip, first of the year. Everybody's learning the same stuff because everybody's kind of lined up. And also, the main reason why we're doing this is because for once, everyone's learning something at the exact same level. This is something I'm super passionate about. It's something that I find very, very important. We're talking now about imperialism, right? Its beginnings, its effects, all of the above. Now, really, really quickly, I'm recording this. It is currently about 9:51 at night on a Monday. I'm recording this now because I want you to realize that it is super important. CP, all right, so that's my regular classes. You're going to be doing these flips Tuesday night and Wednesday night. And then honors, you're going to be doing these flips Wednesday night and Thursday night. Or no, Thursday night and Friday night. Yeah, Thursday night and Friday night. Now, getting into it though, these flips are super, super important. To be able to get all the grades necessary because I may or may not be in school for a minute, because I may or may not be on vacation or whatever, but I want to get this stuff out of the way now so we can get into it, all right? But the biggest and most important thing is don't be like this guy down here. Don't be a mouth breather. Don't mute these videos because a lot of stuff I'm going to be saying is very important that's outside of the content on the slides. But for now, let's get into it. So, imperialism. What is it? Imperialism is the policy of extending the rule or authority of an empire or nation over foreign countries. Basically, what imperialism is when one large developed country takes over a smaller undeveloped country. Now size, notice I say large and small, size isn't a factor because Great Britain, as we can see in this political cartoon, CP, political cartoons are going to be very important for you. As you can see in this political cartoon, England took over almost everything, but England was just a small island off the coast of Europe, right? Just like we know also, the United States of America is the third big, like one of the biggest countries in square mileage, second or third, I think, on the grand scale of things, and has successfully taken over a very large area as well. But size, square mileage doesn't matter. The main thing is developed versus undeveloped, okay? Industrialized versus unindustrialized. So now, before we even get into the real nitty-gritty examples of imperialism, we got to talk about motivations behind imperialism. Why'd they do it? Why was it so important? What were they after? And I'm going to cover up one or the other of these because the biggest thing is by the late 1800s, Europeans in particular, America really hadn't gotten started on imperialism yet, but Europeans in particular owned most of the world, all right? So this is by the late 1800s. Some of y'all are like, well, didn't we just talk about how Italy and Germany just became a country like 5 minutes ago? You're right. They did become countries super recently. Italy in 1861, Germany in 1871. They hadn't been around for a long time, but they still were making moves because a big key element is they were industrialized, right? They had factories. They were a post-industrial society. They were taking raw materials and processing those goods into processed goods, which sold for lucrative amounts of money. So here's the thing. That's what imperialism is all spurred by. It's money. The pursuit of money, particularly taking over other countries for their raw materials or their resources. Examples of these things include palm oil, that's right, I said it, palm oil, rubber, cotton, iron, copper, gold, diamonds, all those things. Palm oil was actually a very, very particular one because it was actually used to keep the machines in factories running, right? All of these things, though, would be taken back to factories in Europe and then processed into goods for money. It's all about money, right? Also, another big motivation for imperialism is nationalism. Some of you are like, wait, we just talked about nationalism 2 seconds ago. Didn't that make Germany and Italy a country? Yeah, but nationalism isn't just limited to creating countries. It's also a big part of bannerment of countries, right? Look at us. We have more colonies than you. Take that. We're Britain. No, 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 no. This is a great example of nationalism. It's this book in 1889 by Mrs. Ernest Ames was actually a book called The ABCs for Baby Patriots, right? And the B stands for battles, right? But the C is the crazy one. Nationalism and imperialism went hand in hand, right? Because the C letter for the ABCs for Baby Patriots went, C is for colonies, rightly we boast. That of all the great nations, Great Britain has the most, right? So even in a child's book, nationalism via imperialism was super evident. Other small motives of imperialism also include religion, military outposts and military extension, right? Setting up forts and other things like that in different countries, as well as foreign markets, right? So some of you are like, what do you mean by foreign markets? So what I'm saying is, for example, when the British took over India, a major component of taking over India early on was the raw materials they brought them. Spices, cotton, gold, silver, things like that, right? However, the British realized the best thing the Indians could do is buy the goods coming out of our factories. So they begin to actually crank out textiles and sell them back to the Indians at cheaper cost, right? So foreign markets is a big one. Now, question, it's 1850, the height of imperialism, right? About 1850-ish. Why hadn't they done this earlier, right? So like, how come the imperialists are just now imperializing, right? It's all about post-industrial technology. Because a lot of the imperialism that had happened in the late 1800s wasn't possible until the late 1800s because they didn't have the technology to do so, right? So technology helped Europeans spread at a rapid rate. New things like steamboats, factories, machines, the Maxim gun. The Maxim gun is a big one. Steamboats are a big one. Factories, modern medicines, a lot of these different items, right? Particularly those of steamboats because it provides cheap transportation that doesn't hinge on animal burden that could possibly die. Factories because it provides cheap goods that give you the ability to actually travel inland in these different countries. Machines, we're going to skip that one. The Maxim gun. The Maxim gun is this bad boy right here, invented by Hiram Maxim. The Maxim gun is just the very first name for the modern machine gun, a fully automatic weapon that gave the ability to imperializers the ability to mow down underdeveloped and destroy underdeveloped countries in any engagement that they actually came into. Because early on, before the Maxim gun was ever developed, a lot of these other places had metal, they had iron, they had different items that they could make blades and things like that out of. And some are going to like, well, like, didn't they have guns already? Well, yeah, but muskets stink. Muskets are no good. What are you going to do with that thing? You're going to load it once, shoot it off, miss, and then you're going to have to battle with a sword anyway, right? And then modern medicines is a big one as well. Things like quinine medicine down here that actually help moderate the effects of malaria, right? The biggest example that we're going to get into first, and as the primary example of imperialism, is the British taking over China, which is one of the saddest examples of imperialism, but it's also one of the best examples of imperialism, all right? And when I say best, I mean it makes a lot of sense, okay? So the British in China. So in the 1790s, let's travel all the way back, before Germany was a country, before Italy was a country, right after Britain had lost the American Revolutionary War. Britain has no money, all right? So in the 1790s, Britain had little to no money left at all, right? Verging on the brink of collapse because the Napoleonic Wars are on the way, right? Trying to prevent the Napoleon from taking over all of Europe, trying to prevent the French Revolution from spreading into England, and also the American Revolution, the French and Indian War. All of the things above left Britain with little to no money. China, on the other hand, is not hurting for funds at all. China is making money hand over fist like it's going out of style. And a lot of this is due to a concept called economic isolationism, all right? Because here's the thing. In China, as boasted by their emperor multiple times, China didn't want for anything. China was completely economically isolated. Everything their country needed could be made and produced within the boundaries of their own country. Tea, porcelain, silk, vegetables, like different produce, meats, like everything they could possibly need. The only thing that China imported up to this point was silver from the Spanish colonies in the Americas, because it's the one thing they didn't have. But other than that, they didn't need anything else. They had porcelain, they had tea, they had silk. Everybody else on the planet wanted China's goods, but not the other way around, all right? And then they also had this thing called the Canton system. So Canton is a very small city over near Hong Kong in southern China. It's a province, actually, right? And that was the only place that, if you see right here in this bottom left corner, the only place that foreign merchants were allowed to trade was in this small area known as Canton, right? This gave the Chinese the ability to track, monitor, and understand the movements of foreign merchants within their country, because they were like, look, at any point we can block you off. We don't need you. And here's the other issue. Britain has an addiction Some of you, I know Deacon, Gabe, Gianna, like even my honors babies, you're gasping. You're like, oh, Britain, addiction. What's their addiction? It's this stuff right here. It's tea, right? 10% of the British economy was going towards the purchasing of Chinese tea, all right? 10% of the average British household went to buying tea, right? So Britain is losing money on their tea addiction, right? And they realized to themselves, like, oh my gosh, we're losing money. We can't afford tea anymore. And we love that stuff. What are we going to do with ourselves? What if we traded them drugs? All right, so then out of nowhere, the British realize we have been looking for our El Dorado. We have been looking for our chance to make money in big, big sums. And the way they were going to do it was one of the most grimy things in all of history. They were like, you know what? We're going to trade the Chinese opium, which is a drug, for tea. Now, the idea was we're going to trade Chinese tea dealers opium, which we can grow for dirt cheap. Write this down right here. For dirt cheap in India. India grows these things called poppies phenomenally well. They're the flowers and buds that you see right here. That's what makes opium, which also makes heroin, right? So they were like, we could grow this stuff for stupid cheap in India, and then we could trade that opium to the Chinese tea dealers, straight up opium for tea, and we take the tea back to Britain, and we sell it at a huge profit, right? They just realized that they could sell it all and make mad money. But opium is stupid illegal in China, all right? The Chinese government for a long time realized that opium could be one of the worst things to ever hit their country in a long time. So it's illegal. You can't buy it, you can't sell it, you can't do anything with the stuff within the borders of China. So the British decide, well, you know, maybe we should listen. Not. And then they just decide to start trading it anyway, right? So they start selling opium to the Chinese on the borders of China without the discretion of the Chinese government. And then you've got drug addicts, drug dens, money being taken out of the hands of the Chinese, right? It's breaking the Chinese economy. So the Chinese try to stop the sale of opium by hiring a very, very, very new, very, very, very experienced general to try and stop it. I think it's Lao Zhen, Chinese general, opium wars. Never remember this guy's name. Well, it's during the Qing dynasty, the Qing dynasty. But I'll ask me on Monday or when I get back. All right, like we'll look it up. Now, the Chinese try to stop the sale of opium by hiring this general to go through all the Chinese ports, seize opium, dump it into the ocean, seize it at the ports, destroy it at all costs, and at one point, he actually finds the biggest shipment of opium he's ever seen. 21,000 chests worth of opium, which is worth a ridiculous amount of money. And he burns it all in front of the British trade dealer's face. Now, the British, because technically this is international trade, demand compensation for their drugs. Notice I put that in all capital letters because the British were drug dealers, right? But the Chinese refused to pay them, right? Because here's the thing. The British had legally grown this drug in India and had planned to sell it to independent Chinese merchants. They felt that the Chinese government had no right to destroy their trade good, whereas the Chinese government was like, we have every right to destroy this stuff that's addicting our population. And so the British demanded compensation, which leads to these things known as the Opium Wars breaking out. There was the first and the second Opium War. And unfortunately, the Chinese are going to lose both of these wars because they are technologically behind the British and the Americans, the French, and the Russians, because the British had called the Americans, the French, and the Russians to also help them open China, all right? Because the Brits were like, look, if you come and help us, we can open China and establish these things known as spheres of influence, right? Or port cities that are open to certain European or American cities, right? So all the Chinese ports, Britain also, by the way, owns Hong Kong after this is all said and done, were open to international trade. This entire thing was known as the century of humiliation for China, right? Merchants weren't subject to Chinese laws anymore, but only to their own countries. And China had to pay foreigners to trade in their own country. Rebellions are going to rise up in defiance of this opening. The Taiping Rebellion is a big one, and so is the Boxer Rebellion. The Taiping Rebellion saw the death of 20 million people, right? These uprisings were crushed at a loss of millions of Chinese lives because it wasn't just these rebellions versus Europeans. It was actually the Chinese government versus the rebellions versus Europeans. So the Chinese and these foreigners were destroying these rebellions, leading to massive amounts of death and loss of life, right? So that's the Chinese imperialism by the Europeans. Here are all the spheres of influence. As you can tell, all of the stuff in green is the Chinese. Every other color belongs to a foreign power, following the Opium Wars, right? And that's it. That's your first flip in the two-part flip series that are going to be jointly between Honors and CP. I hope you guys have a great time. This is going to be due when I get back. Do not flex on me. Do not mute these things. Make sure you get your homework done. Every single thing in class while I'm gone is going to be based off these flips. Do it. Get it done. I hope you have a great time. I'll see you then.